If you want to hear new episodes of the show 1 week early, plus bonus episodes and unlimited access to more of Texas Monthly's reporting and commentary on the state, subscribe to Texas Monthly at texasmonthly.com/audio. You can find that link in the show notes for this episode.
Texas Monthly.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Viva Tejano, a Texas Monthly podcast about Tejano music told by the people who make it and live it. I'm your host, JB Sauceda. This week, I sat down with Sonny Sauceda. Sonny's been playing Tejano music since the age of 5, raised in a family of musicians, and committed to a life in the music business. As a kid, he learned to play the accordion, even though he kind of hated it, by practicing silently in the mirror, so he wouldn't bother the rest of the house. He's played in the family band, started his own acts, and recorded solo. He's won 3 Grammy Awards and dozens of Tejano Music Awards. And this year, after 40 years in the industry, he and his accordion made the switch to Texas country. In November, he became the first ever winner of the new Tejano category at the Texas Country Music Awards. We talk about his upbringing in San Antonio, why he made that leap into country, and what makes a song Tejano versus Texas country. Before we do, though, he and I start off with a clip from the early years of the Johnny Canales Show, a show in Houston in 1989 that featured one of Tejano's biggest stars, Emilio Navarra. In the show, Emilio warmed up the crowd with his Spanish-language hit, Pienso en Ti, before switching to English to cover George Strait's Baby's Gotten Good at Goodbye. All right, here's Sonny Sauceda. One of the things that we have been doing is kicking things off with the clip of Johnny Canales.
Yeah.
Did you watch the show growing up?
I did.
All right.
Yeah.
So I've got one that I think is pretty pertinent to our discussion today.
Okay.
So he's on the tail end of a song here, one of my favorite songs of his.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Holy
Bueno,
moly.
para los accordions, para todos ustedes, para todos California, para todos que lo acompañan aquí de Houston, Texas, para todos ustedes que lo acompañan, it goes out to all the guys wearing hats out there, the Houston, Texas, a little country tune. Goes out to all the good
What do you feel or see or think?
Man. It warms your heart. It kind of reminds me, Dick Clark said, music is the soundtrack of your life. Now, although I didn't live during these times, this is a little bit before my time, or before I really got into Tejano, but it just warms your heart. It fills your heart. And it's just, there's a sense of pride that is invoked even just watching an old video like this, right? Because you're like, wow, that's Emilio when he was young, and when Tejano was really just exploding. And it's just, it feels good.
Well, and he's covering George Strait in this clip.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of interesting too. You know, Emilio, I was having this conversation with somebody recently about Selena doing the crossover.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people pointed to her as being like the artist that was doing the crossover thing. But like Emilio, I feel like a lot of people forgot, was like on the beginning stages of that, I feel like in the kind of middle to late 90s, right? That he was starting to cross over into country music too.
He really was. I kind of attribute a lot of what's going on in our music right now. I always say, if they had made a Emilio movie when he passed away, there would be a lot of young men wanting to get into Tejano.
Interesting.
Well, think about it. How many, like before we only had a few girls playing singing Tejano. Now we have like a plethora of, to quote the Three Amigos, right? It's a plethora of these female singers. Like, we are outnumbered. Like 9-1, maybe 10-1. Like,
Really?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many young vocalists, Tejanas, so many even rap artists, reggaeton artists that are singing, giving her tributes. And I've always said, like, I wish they had made a movie about Emilio and his life and how he transformed the industry. How he not only was a great musician, he was a great person. He was into philanthropy. He gave back. Like, it's not always about the gig. It's not always about the fame. The fame, the money, all that is it's a result of the work that you're putting in and the team that you have around you. I don't consider that success, though. I think that you have to be well-rounded.
But I want to go back to something you said though,
Yeah.
which is that like if they had
Made a movie.
if they had made a movie about him,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have what we have happening right now in the music. What is happening right now in the music that you're kind of pointing to?
Well, I mean, we're not. I don't think it's as prevalent, but we went through a time where it was a bad word to say the T word. Oh, don't you dare say you're Tejano. I used to get told that.
Really?
Don't be telling anybody you're Tejano. If you want to get into Mexico, if you want to be to these different venues, don't tell them you're Tejano. Even till now, some of my old friends from the regional side will say.
Oh, so you're saying on the kind of like outside of Tejano music, don't say you're Tejano. Why do you think that that's the case?
From what I've learned is that our business, my predecessors were very closed, and they treated the other genres with zero respect. They weren't open to them, which I get. Now I understand why. Because now if I try to go to a regional place, they're like, well, you're not. Why would we want you to be here? And it's still some of that old, like if you talk to somebody who lived during the civil rights movement, that's still in there. There's like against like anything that's not Latino, right? So I think there's just a little bit left of it, right? And so there was a time where people would say, oh, don't say you're Tejano. I mean, you think about when Selena died, it was Palominos, it was La Mafia, Roberto Pulido, and then there's Pai Pulido, and then there's Intocable. Who's Intocable? And then little by little, you know, there were the gatekeepers of the radio industry that went by statistics and numbers. There was like, well, you know, the numbers show that there's more Mexican nationals there are, you know, Texans. So we're going to start switching formats. It's a bigger market, bigger industry. If that had never really happened, if they had stayed here, you know, we had maybe when Emilio died, had a movie about him. I will admit, though, my old manager used to tell me, I said, Sonny, it's not your fault, but you're surrounded by an industry that doesn't know business. So it was bad business sense. We blew up really quick, didn't know what to do with the money, with the budgets.
That's actually something that Bobby Pulido kind of pointed to, that like the infrastructure and the money drive sort of the fame and the sort of fever pitch. And he pointed to two things. One was that previous to really the kind of heyday of Tejano in the late 80s, early 90s, that the big record labels weren't here. And then they showed up, and they were here. And then the second thing was that when they showed up, they brought the songwriters, which was also another kind of big infrastructural investment. But that seemingly disappeared kind of after she died. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. I had dear friends of mine, mentors of mine, great songwriters. They would talk about how if they placed a song with a Mexican regional band, they would get an advance on the royalties, like automatically, because they knew that thing was going to sell. And so that's where you wanted to be. I mean, you're not going to want to give your song to, in their eyes, Tejano wasn't making money back then anymore. So why would you do that? And it did happen. I ran into that. They were mentors. Hey, can you give me a song? Well, I'll send you some that I've been recorded. They didn't do too well, but I can't give you my good stuff. I love you, but I can't give you my good stuff. And that's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Do you define yourself as a Tejano musician?
You know what?
Or like historically?
I historically have been, and I grew up in it. I've always kind of been. I'm a bumblebee. I'm a unicorn. I'm a rare breed. I'm like a rocker trapped in an accordion player's body. I grew up with rock, right? So I've always been kind of crazy. I used to have long hair, contacts. I would have these crazy jeans. Cut my accordion in half with a chainsaw. So I mean, Tejano purists will say, well, it's not really Tejano. So I could be maybe conjunto, but then the conjunto guys are like, you're too crazy. You're not traditional. You're like everything. You're like Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was crazy. He was next level. Steve Jordan, same thing. He was just always pushing the boundaries, the creative boundaries. Now I'm pushing creative, the show, things that you wouldn't expect, because I really feel people want to be entertained.
Do you feel like there's more of an openness to that now in the last kind of 10 to 15 years versus the 90s or the 2000s?
I think in the 90s there was a big openness to it, because there were a lot of show bands. Right now we don't have a lot of show bands. We really don't.
How do you define a show band? Who's on that list? La Fiebre.
I mean, back then was La Sombra, La Fiebre, Excelencia, Los Chamacos, Tormenta. You know, Tu perro me mordió. You know, La Fiebre with their trumpets. And they're dancing. They have choreography. You know, they had a show. They had props. Emilio had the shuffle. You know, Eddie, when I was with Eddie, we did, you know, we were doing the shimmy thing. And we were, so everybody, I mean, it's kind of gimmicky, right? But everybody.
But it's not any different than Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. You know? I mean, like, that they would do the shimmy. And
you know, and so that's where I come from. I live in this Tejano, Tex-Mex, Texas country world, but in my mind, I've always thought like a pop artist. You know, the Michael Jackson you listened to with the Jackson 5 was not the Michael Jackson you ended up with. So we're always evolving, always pushing that, like, what's next? What can we do now? How can I outdo myself?
So I played this clip of Emilio going from Pienso en Ti to, you know, him playing George Strait.
Yeah.
In part because I think that I grew up in a household that would be the way that the records were selected at my parents' house. You know, we would go from them playing Los Chachos to my dad putting a Merle Haggard album on. You know, you've more recently made a switch, you know, in terms of just production, to my understanding, to country music. Like, what was the calculus there?
Well, the year 2000, maybe 1999, 2000, I got a page from Emily Robeson from the Dixie Chicks. And she wanted accordion lessons. Now, that whole story is even crazier because she saw Sheryl Crow play accordion at Times Square. Charlie, her husband at the time, was on Sony Discos on Sony. He had seen the album I recorded with Eddie. He remembered there was an accordion player on there. They lived in San Antonio. They went to the music store. The music store manager was a friend of mine because we spent a lot of money there. So we loved us, right? And I gave accordion lessons at the time. You know, I was a struggling musician. And I just was trying to make money. Like, hey, I'll give you lessons or whatever you want to do. And so she paged me, and I was like, I don't know who this is. And I didn't even call back. She paged for a second time. Hey, this is Emily, and we're gonna go on. We're gonna have full dress rehearsal. Can we do an accordion lesson? And I finally said, okay. I didn't know who she was. She said, but just don't give anybody my address. And I'm like, why would I give? Okay, what? Well, I find out.
I mean, that period in particular, I mean, they were huge.
They were
huge.
They were ginormous, and I had no idea who they were. I was living under a rock at the time. And I was like, oh, okay. So we get together, and I show up with a piano. She has a piano accordion. I have a button accordion. It was so funny. I'm like, wait a minute. It's still an accordion. I can teach you some stuff. And from there, I invited her to a show. And at the time, we had a singer that sang country. And I said, I'm always the rosy red shades guy. I'm always looking at the silver lining. You know, I see opportunity everywhere I go. That's just me. I've always been that way. And I said, well, I invited her to a show. Maybe she'll just like direct us like to a guy or a manager or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to make stuff happen, right? We're shaking the trees. She goes to the show. And then Charlie, from between the show and then maybe a month later, he's like, hey, I want you to record with me. I was like, shoot, that's cool. Yeah, of course, yeah.
What did you record with him?
I recorded on the Step Right Up album, you know, Life of the Party. And he was a great guy. We did it at Pedernales, Willie Nelson's studio. I was so excited. And they were like, oh, you're going to get paid union scales. I didn't even know what that was. I would have done it for tacos. Like, I'm going to get paid too? What? And so I was excited.
Well, it started when I was in high school. My mom and my dad taught me well. A bottle of wine at Thanksgiving and a Valium when Grandma raised hell.
When I show up to the studio that day, he says, hey, the girls want to know if you want to open up for them. Because I had invited them to go see us at the Conto Festival. And they actually went. The guys were all like, oh my gosh, this is Emily Robeson.
So you get a 1-2. I mean, you're there to record with Charlie Robeson, and then you get invited to open for the Dixie Chicks.
And I say, what do you mean? Like in the parking lot? Like while they're eating? And he's like, no, like for them. I'm like, get out of here. Come on. He's like, no, I'm being serious. I said, well, okay. And so that's what happened. And so ever since then, we played with them, we didn't do country. They actually wanted us to play only Tejano.
Whoa.
Their thing was, we want to educate our audience. Because we did play country. And I thought that's why we were there. And no, sir.
What was the audience reception?
They loved it.
Even outside of Texas?
They loved cumbias. They loved it. I mean, you know who didn't like it? My Latino friends.
You mean like Latinos outside of Texas?
Yes.
Got it. What is that? Like, why do you think? Is it because in South Carolina, Mexicanos there just don't listen to Tejano music or cumbias? Is it because it was Cubans, Puerto Ricans? Like, what do you attribute that to?
It could have been a number of things. It could have been just that, or at the time, I mean, I hate to say it like this, but at the time it really wasn't cool to be like a Tejano or a Mexican, right? Like now with the whole country Latino movement that we're working on with Azteca Ranch, it's a thing, I just talked to my A&R today. He said, we're in Nashville. Like, that's the rave right now. So back then, it wasn't the right time, even though we talked about it all the time, about doing, Emilio was the first to really do it. And not the first. In Tejano, I mean, there was Freddie Fender, Johnny Rodriguez. But I attribute it to that. But that's how that all started, how I got into it. I started noticing. And the thing they'd always tell me, well, me and when I was with Grupo Vida, they would say, we love what you do. We just wish we knew what you were saying. They love the show. They love the shimmy. They love everything we do. They just didn't know what we were saying. So I was thinking, if I can figure out how to do what I do, but in English, and I'm just kind of I'm barely tipping my feet into the water, but in order to be taken seriously in the Texas country market, you gotta be with Texas country producers. My theory is once I get 2, 3, 4 records under my belt, then I have my credibility. Now I can start really arranging how I want to arrange.
Do you feel like, it's like, is this a burning the boats moment? Like, are you in a situation where pursuing country music in this way will limit your ability to still play as a Tejano? No. In New Braunfels, we have like one Tejano place, and then there's one German place that everybody goes to. But if you were to switch them, like, we're all the same. They're not gonna go. Like, if you go put a Tejano in a German spot, the Tejanos won't go there, and vice versa. But what's happening now is that there's a lot of Tejanos in Texas country, and so I call it switching lanes. We're still doing Tejano. We're still making Tejano records. Now we're gonna be doing Texas country, or in Oklahoma they call me Tejano Red Dirt. And then the other day I said, what did I call it? Tehonky Tonky or something like that. Tehonky Tonky. And so I feel it opens up another market for you. Is that new though? Like, do you feel like if you had tried to do the country thing deliberately, would the Tejano audience have been frustrated by that 15, 20 years ago? Like, is there just more open-mindedness to it now?
I'll be honest with you, when Emilio did it, because Emilio, he made the mistake of saying he was leaving Tejano.
Yeah, I remember my parents being, or at least my mom being a little like, turned off by it.
No, I've always been kind of a trailblazer. You're talking about, the thing that put me on the map was El Disgusto, which was rapid accordion fire with the snare, nothing really had. I mean, people had done sextuplets, but we're doing with the bass following, the drums following. We used to make fun of me and the drummer, like, man, it's like my accordion is triggered to the drummer. We're like connected because we did everything together, almost like a heavy metal band, like Metallica. You listen to like I don't know. One da 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 at the end. It's all that kind of style. I put it into a ranchera. I didn't do it. It was by accident, but I listened to heavy metal a lot, so it kind of happened. I guess subconsciously it happened that way. And I would rap. I would make accordion licks. I would make them up according to what Eddie was doing. So if he did a certain move, I would do a lick. I would make up licks as we were going. So it always looked like we knew what we were doing, but we were just flying off the cuff. And then after that, it just kind of took off. It started. We were test marketing the whole concept. But we were just having fun. We were kids. We were just having fun. But people are open to the Texas country. It's so funny now because I have a whole country show. But when they find out I do Tejano, they're like, oh, can you just do what you want to do? You want to do cumbias? So I did my first official Texas country show last October. And I started the show with Detroit Rock City like I always do. We went into some polkas, and then I did a cumbia, and then I went into Hank Williams Jr., did like 3 country songs, then I went to cumbias, then I went back to country, and then I did more cumbias. And at the end, and it was mostly non-Spanish speaking people. And I said, what do you think? Was it too much? They're like, we love it. We didn't even know we like cumbias. My entire career has been like the kids love it. Mom loves it. Grandma loves it. Because we're having fun, right? Like music's an extension of your emotions, right? Regardless of what language it is. Fun is fun is fun. You know, good time is a good time is a good time. So I've always had that. And it's so weird. I didn't realize I did, but I did. So now you throw in like something like hot sauce or womanizer. Now we're doing the same thing, but now they understand.
I was going to ask, I mean, what are the similarities between Tejano music and country? Remove the language from the difference between the two.
There really isn't. I mean, we're all talking about love, you know, getting hurt, getting our heart broken. I love her. I want to marry her. I want to dance with her. You know, it's just a different language, but we're all singing about the same things. I think that's why it transcends. And I think people feel that, you know. Anybody, whatever language it is, they can tell. Like if you see I have a song called Niño. It's about my son. And I've showed it to all our Texas country folks, you know, our country, and they're like, I don't know what you're saying, but I can see the emotions. And so it's about my older son who's special needs, you know, and you know, it's about a father and his love for his son. So all these things, we've all been through them.
Niño, ya no llores. Niño, no estés triste. No tengas miedo, que aquí estoy. Niño, no te asustes. Niño, ven conmigo. En mis brazos te tengo, que aquí estoy. You know, one of the questions that I've posed to people has been, is Tejano music, you know, still in kind of a healthy state? Is it dying? Did it get a punch in the gut? Like, how would you describe its trajectory or sort of its state relative to where it was kind of at peak Tejano, you know, 85 to 95?
I think it's still rebuilding. I think we're in a cycle. We're at the bottom of the wave.
Interesting.
And I think it's starting to wave up because I see it's not such a bad word anymore. We were talking about that earlier. It's not such a bad word anymore. And there's a lot of kids playing. It's not exactly Tejano, but it falls in that vein. Even like Frontera, their lyrics are freaking awesome. Their melodies are awesome. The arrangements and the sounds, those right there, that bass is kind of what I saw, like kind of after Intocable, all that kind of that vibe. Which there's nothing wrong with it. It's still music. It's great. I love it. I really enjoy it. And but the thing is, right now the current regime we have is kind of like, no, you're not Tejano. No, you're not. Like, no.
Well, this has come up, and I'll step out of Tejano for a second and talk about. I was talking about Charlie Crockett, and how a lot of his first few records were really kind of going back into that kind of 60s, 70s, 80s country style. You know, it's so good, right? And somebody, a friend of mine, was kind of arguing that, is that authentic? You know, if that wasn't like you're not from that era. And my comment in response was that, you know, we talk about like you are genre jumping, you know, in so to speak, right? You're going from Tejano to country, like they're two somewhat distinct genres. And I always talk about eras as being a type of genre, right?
Yeah.
So with Tejano, I think about it the same way. I think about Tejano as the purists look at it as everything that was produced between basically 85 and 95 has been locked in place as this is Tejano.
And it's so funny because you're right, and it is like encapsulated in that era. One of my mentors and all record label presidents, Chris Leak, would always say, "Sonny, if you were in pop, you would be a has-been. But you're in Tejano. The older, the fatter, the uglier you are, the more legendary you are." And I would laugh and say, well, I'm well on my way then. Because we're the Mexican mindset, Latino, we respect our elders. And if you're a kid, you don't know anything. You know, what would they tell you? No te puedes limpiar la cola. What are you gonna tell me? Come on, todo meow. So, in Texas country, it's reverse. They're all about uplifting. Oh, this is new guy. You think that I could have shown up 10 years ago with an accordion, a pink accordion, a blinged accordion, Mexicano, and just, hey, I'm here. Because that's what I did. I just showed up. That's all I really did. And so, but it's backwards. But I feel that we need to be open, though. I really do. I feel that we do need to be open to all new talent, new ideas, because we need to evolve. Like, with all respect to my predecessors and what they did in the 90s, but that's also what hurt us. Because we're not musically evolving, lyrically evolving. But it's hard to do that when people want this certain thing from you. And when you don't do that for them, then they're like, oh, that's not really. So it's kind of we're tug of war, right?
I wouldn't totally fault the musicians for leaning or whoever for playing kind of the hits. I would almost attribute more of that to the lack of infrastructure. Again, like if there's nowhere to make a new song a hit, then it never becomes one, and as a result, never becomes part of the repertoire and the like touring playlist. Right?
And that's where I was going with it. The other thing, the other side of it is, so the people, radio is a big thing. Like even with the little radio we have, there are very few of us that are getting. They're programming. They're top 40 programming. Top 40 programming is not making hits. So radio doesn't do that anymore. There are very, very few exceptions to the rule.
You brought something up though, which was before we started recording. You were talking about your TikTok following.
That's another thing.
Yes. So I've been pointing to this a bit because around the same time that I decided with the team here to do this podcast, I started seeing more conjunto in my feed. And I don't know why, but I just started seeing more of it on TikTok. I think now more than ever, there's an opportunity for music, Tejano, conjunto, norteño, etc., to break through because of the direct, feed it through my veins vehicle that you have with TikTok.
Absolutely.
Is that true from an artist perspective?
Oh, 100%. When TikTok came out, I posted a video. And then there was a meme called, at the time said, "Damn, he's thick." And then I put something similar. It was, you could see my silhouette, and it said, "Damn." I think I put there, "Damn, he's thick." So it was an innuendo. It was the music. It was the show, and it went viral. Somebody says, #Saucy McDickums. And then I was like, ooh, I like that. So I kept using that. I kept using Saucy McDickens.
This is the thing about our last name is that it works real well for nicknames.
Absolutely.
What's
up, Saucy?
I call my house the Sauceda.
I love that. Sauceda,
yeah.
And so that's why we came, even the new single is called Hot Sauce, and it's a hot sauce bottle. So I don't know if your dad ever did this, but we go to the Mexican restaurants, and my dad would get a pen and put DA at the end of the word sauce.
No.
Sauceda.
But I'm definitely going to start.
Now you're going to start. So you look at the cover, if you zoom in, you'll see they graphically put a writing of a pen with the DA. You have to really zoom in.
Yeah.
But I did it. I mean, it's like the devil's in the details. But we were going to call it Redneck Mexican, but that may have been a little too much for people.
And going back to your point about the idea that you would like a music but not know what they say, for example, people who don't know Spanish. As a firm no sabo kid, that was my challenge growing up.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find the band. Easy Band is the name.
Yeah.
And these guys
they
do this.
I love it.
Sueña.
I love their stuff.
And they'll perform these Tejano or norteño songs and sing them in English. And that to me is such a cool way to this is
that's a cool concept. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, do you see that as being an additional opportunity for you, especially as someone who's kind of a shapeshifter musically?
Yeah.
Is that where you're trying to take social media for yourself?
I wish that more of my colleagues did this. They don't know how to use social media. we're kind of getting left in the behind because of social media, because of the hustle. You know, a lot of I'm going to say it, you know, a lot of my predecessors, they live in this world of entitlement. Well, I was big in the 90s and like, I need somebody to do this for me. I'm like, no, man, you got to hustle. You got to do it. You got to want it. And that's why these kids, these norteño bands, anybody, they're eating your lunch because you're not hustling. You're not grinding.
I don't know. Like, I want the music to continue. I don't feel as strongly about it having to be pure. And I want the standards to continue, but I also want it to be found by a wider audience.
Johnny Ramirez said once to me, and you remember Johnny Ramirez from KXN, and he said, we had a meeting one day, and I was a kid, I was young, I just wanted to meet with him. Like, I was trying to be a radio promoter, so like, we need to get played more. He said, you know what, Sonny? You know, my job's hard. He said, because I have to sit in front of this mic every day, and I have to figure out how to keep the audience and get new people with the same song you did. And if you wait too long, I still have to keep doing that same job with that one song. So, with that said, I was like, oh, you're so right. So we have to figure out how to keep the core, but expand the brand.
Is that to kind of like round things out? I mean, where does Tejano music go from here? Where does the genre, where does the people, where do we go from here?
I think we keep growing. I think I feel we embrace the new talent. I feel we grab everybody and just kind of like, hey, come in over here. Like, bring your talent over here. Let's come over here. We have to change our mindset. We embrace the new talent. We coddle them, and we encourage them, and we uplift them because we all rise together. And if you're a person in a position of power, you mentor them, right? One thing that I've learned out of Texas country is that they all help each other. It's a big family. And so, funny thing is, when you leave home, you never really know what you have until you leave. So when I come back to the Tejano Music Awards, I get emotional. I love my Patitores. I love to see Ram or like George Rivas, man. Like, he's like one of the guys that like so unappreciated, right? People don't appreciate artists until they're gone. Appreciate them while they're here. Go to the shows, buy the ticket. My own father he refused to let me give him a ticket to the show. He says, I'm going to pay to go see you play because I know you're getting paid and I want to support you. That's how this is going to grow. That's what I see.
All right, that was my conversation with Sonny Sauceda. Thanks so much to Sonny for joining me in the studio, and thanks to all of y'all for listening. We'll be back next week with Veronique Medrano. She'll talk about what it takes to make a viral hit in Tejano music today and her preservation work as an archivist of Tejano music history. See you then. Adios. Viva Tejano is a Texas monthly podcast hosted by me, JB Sauceda. Our executive producer is Megan Kripe. The show is produced by Ella Kapakin and Patrick Michaels and produced and engineered by Brian Standifer. Additional production by Aisling Ayers. Consulting producer is Adrian Arredondo. A huge thanks to our partners, Mirna Perez and Adrian Arredondo, for access to the Johnny Canales Show archives. Keep an eye out for the upcoming documentary, Take It Away, which chronicles the rise and fall of Tejano Hollywood. Artwork is by Jen Hare Tompkins and Victoria Milner. Thank you all for listening. Adios. And remember, you don't need to wait for next week to hear the next episode. Get early access now by becoming a Texas Monthly audio subscriber at texasmonthly.com/audio.